just wanted to get you on and take a coach who's basically grown up in St. Louis, played in the St. Louis baseball scene. This is baseball 101. Let's break it down to the bare bones. We have right-handed pitching phenom Nick Boughton here. Welcome in, everyone. This is Baseball 101, powered by Youth Baseball Midwest. I'm Dave Wiggins. I'm your host. Today, calling in on the Prime Sports Midwest call link, we have Andy Marks with Mach 1 Pitching. Andy is a well-revered pitching coach slash pitching strategist here in our St. Louis area. He's been doing this for a long time. Andy and I have known each other for over a decade now, maybe close to 20 years now. I'm getting old. He's getting old. Wanted to bring Andy on and discuss pitching development at the youth and high school level. Obviously, that's an area that you're basically living in right now. Andy, if you could just kind of give everyone a little bit of a background of you and your playing career, and then also your coaching career leading up into kind of what you're doing now with Mach 1.
Yeah, so like you said, I think we're the same age. Went to Oakville, played at Oakville, graduated in 2005. Is that the same year as you?
I was 04, but I'm a young 04, so yeah.
Okay. Yeah, and then I pitched at the University of Kansas. I got injured there after my sophomore year. Through like 175 innings my sophomore year, and the old arm couldn't take it anymore. And then when I came back from college, I started coaching with the St. Louis Gamers. One of my old high school coaches at Oakville kind of asked me if I wanted to get into some coaching because he was coaching with the Gamers, and something I never really thought about. So I tried it out and obviously loved it and started doing pitching lessons on the side. And then once my wife and I had a kid, coaching and spending my summers out of town all the time was kind of, you know, not an option for me anymore. So then I just stuck with the private training. We started Mach 1 at All Star Performance in 2017, and going strong with that now for about 9 years now, and that's about all I do now. Just trying to get those high school kids and some middle school kids, but yeah, mostly high school, college, just to their full potential.
Excellent. And do you have a team that you work with who's helping you nowadays?
Yeah, so it's we kind of like switch it up every year, depending on like we'll try to get kids that are just out of college, or trying to figure out what they want to do. So every year we have a couple new people. My main helper is Max Spitzmiller. He's the head coach at Kirkwood High School. Matt Whiteside, owner of All Star, he does a lot of the groundwork on, like, getting people signed up and making sure everything's going smoothly. As far as being in there in the bullpen with me, working with the kids, this year it was Cole Kuntz, who's playing his senior year right now at UMBC up in Baltimore, and then Cam Lloyd, who he played at Johnson County. he played at a couple different schools, but he just kind of finished up his playing career, and he's been helping me a lot too.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm familiar with Max. Obviously, coaching against Max the last year at Webster with him being at Kirkwood, and bouncing different things off each other there. And then obviously, Cole Kuntz played for me for a year or so when he was in high school. A great pitcher back in high school for Eureka. And then, well, man, he's been through it, hasn't he? He was at Johnson County. He was at SIU. Now he's at
Yep.
UMBC. Just we're kind of
Yep.
seeing that more and more. These guys ending up at 3, 4 different places instead of just going to one place, kind of like you did at
Like,
Kansas.
it's crazy.
Yeah,
I couldn't even
it
imagine
is.
back then. Whole different world.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, you know, Throughout the years, obviously before you guys built Mach 1, what did pitching training look like? Where what were you guys doing, and I guess essentially how have things how have things changed? How have things evolved from, back when we were younger, we were given one-on-one 30-minute lessons. What are some of the changes that you've encountered over over the years, and what ultimately led you and Matt to basically start Mach 1?
Yeah, when I started, it was definitely the pitching lesson route, just like we grew up on, and that's all I really ever knew. Um, which I mean, that's still around, still it's very prevalent in the area, especially with younger kids now. But then I started, honestly, like you were one of the people that I feel like was first diving into this like new way of training, and I remember we had a back and forth on Facebook, and I was like, man, like I feel like I don't know anything. And then I started traveling around the country, going to a couple different like Pitchapalooza was one of them. I heard all these like really smart people talking, and I came back to All Star, and I was like, Matt, like we have to change like everything we're doing. This is like there's just so much more out there. So that's, we kind of got a team of people together and put our heads together, and that's where we blended the weight room and the assessments. And we were definitely not like one of the first ones, but I feel like we got into it early enough to where a lot of the kids and baseball players around here and parents, like it was super new to them, and yeah, it's come a long way, and it's man, it's so much better. It makes me wish that we had this stuff around when we were playing for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah. Instead of going to St. Louis baseball fast pitch and doing our 30-minute lesson with Lance or
Yeah.
Bones. Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, there's some value to that stuff as far as just like, learning a new pitch, or, getting a younger kid to be able to like throw strikes. Like you can still do stuff, but as far as just lasting effects on someone's body that's really going to translate, a couple years down the road, it's no question that this was the way to go.
Yeah, credit to Matt Whiteside, obviously, for hearing you out, listening to the information you had gathered, and he's an ex big leaguer, right? Sometimes those guys tend to have egos where they did it their way back then, so that's how they're going to do it now. But it sounds as though he was way more forward thinking, and he trusted you enough to kind of feel comfortable with doing that whole revamp. Just kind of explain your relationship with Matt over the years and how things have gone there.
Yeah. Big props to him. If you know Matt, he is like super old. You think of like an old school baseball player, like he might be on the cover of that book. And as far as just mentality and hard work, and it's different mindset than today. But man, he has really like he's always open to listen to the people closest to them, and he at the end of the day, like he truly just wanted the best program, and if he thinks that there's something else out there that's better for the kids that he's seeing, he's going to be all ears for it. And Matt and I have been super close. He's always treated me like his own son, and anything that I've asked for, he's always there to get it for me, like super open book about everything. So like as old school as I think, he wanted to be, like he understands, and he's done a good job at you know, keeping up with the times on things. And he realizes to keep it to a good business, you got to adapt. We're definitely, I know some big leaguers, we're probably thinking the same people online that we see on X or whatever. They would not be the same. And there was another ex big leaguer that used to work there. I won't name his name, but you probably know. Like he eventually just got out of the business because he would not adapt. And well, that's what happens. Like it's proven that this stuff works, and Matt's done an awesome job. I can't say enough positive things about him.
Yeah, that's awesome. Like I said, it's sometimes it's hard for guys who have played at that level and who did things a certain way that got them to where they were to be open to adapt. But obviously, being as forward thinking as he was, and understanding that if I want to keep growing my business and I want to keep helping these kids, I've got to kind of make sure I'm staying with the times. You're seeing that more and more now, right? Obviously,
Yeah. Oh,
we could probably name 5 or 6 pitching programs in our area that are all kind of based around the same way we do things with the open enrollment model, where you have multiple kids in working with multiple instructors. There's a strength component to it, there's a movement component to it, there's a recovery. Um and and it's made the kids more aware and self-aware of how they're moving, and how they can obviously make adjustments on the fly versus kind of being coached into an adjustment. And that's something that I've really seen the benefit of, is kind of taking these kids from your basic 30-minute get on the mound, throw 60 pitches. I'm going to give you this order and this order, and move this way and throw the ball this way. It's just been more about coaching them to be athletic and move athletically, be athletes on the mound. If you could just go over a few guys that you've kind of worked with throughout the years, that are now kind of seeing some big gains, or whether they're juniors or seniors in high school, or just kind of some, I'm not going to say case studies, but guys that you've worked with for a good amount of time, that you've really been able to see the progress and the growth. Just want to highlight some of those guys, and talk about them for a minute.
yeah. I mean, I would say two kids that I've probably worked with the longest that are both seniors right now would be Michael Strong. He's senior at SLU, and I probably started working with him when he was maybe like 12 years old. Just a tall, scrawny little kid that just couldn't figure out how to move down the mound. And that's a kid where, like, if you kept doing pitching lessons with him, it's like, and you never got him into lifting, like, who knows what his ceiling would have been, but I doubt it would have been very high. But I mean, he's a kid now. You look at him, and he's just like built just like a, you look at a D1 athlete, that's what one looks like. He's in there all the time. He's hitting 90 miles an hour constantly. um, so it's really been fun to watch him, you know grow throughout the years. He's dealt with a couple injuries, and I think that's the best part about some of this stuff with the assessment, and working with some of the PTs that we have in the area. I think we're blessed with some good PTs that we have contacts with that we can send guys to, and really just figured out the best way to like move his body to be able to throw without it hurting. Not everybody's gonna sit in their back leg the same way. Not everyone's gonna have the same arm slots, and I think that's one thing that's really grown from when we were growing up. Is it was kind of just like you went to your instructor, and that guy was going to teach you the one way, and he was going to teach the other 40 kids the same way. So just like learning that stuff over the years of how a kid moves, and what makes his body be able to move fast and comfortably. um, he's been a great study for that. The other kid, Zach Van Hook, I think I've been working with him the longest. I think I've seen Zach since he was like 9 or 10 years old. And like, if he has a good year this year, I think he's got a chance to get drafted pretty early on. Left-hander from Vianney, up to 95 on the mound, pretty much sitting 93, like, unbelievable. He really like went all in this year. He was always a basketball player, and he played basketball all through junior year. It's just this year, he was sick of losing 10, 15 pounds before the season started, and he really just went all in on the weight room and has been in the facility 5, 6 days a week. And same kind of thing with him as with Michael. Is just a scrawny kid who like had a good arm, but always was just kind of all over the place and couldn't really control those long limbs. And he's been someone who really needed to like put on some weight and be strong and figure out how to control his body. And this year it's just taken such a huge leap. I'm really excited to watch him this spring.
Yeah, talking about Michael. Obviously, he's been one of the better pitchers for SLU. I want to say since his freshman year, he was getting innings as a freshman. And what was he, 82, 84 for the first half of his high school career. but he could just flat out pitch, right? He could spin it, he could mix it up, he would compete hard on the mound. Um, and then obviously, he gets stronger, he gets in the weight room, he's putting on more velocity, and he's now touching 90. Um, you know, even in Zach's case, right? Like I've known Zach for a few years now, and I've always thought highly of Zach as an athlete. I've always thought he had a good arm, same as you. But if you had told me when Zach was 14 that he's going to throw 95 his senior year and could be a top five round draft pick, I would have been pretty in awe of that, right? Um, and it just goes to show that the 95-mile-an-hour arm that Zach now, Zach wasn't throwing 85 when he was 12 years old, right? Zach
No,
Zach was just your
absolutely.
normal 12, 13-year-old kid, and I feel like we're in such a hurry now to get these kids to throw as hard as they possibly can, as early as they can. And like we have to understand that if you're throwing 85 at 13, you're not going to throw 115 at 18.
Yeah.
It's just not
Yeah.
how it works, right? Our human bodies are only capable of so much, and
Yeah.
it just kind of falling in love with the process of getting better and working on being a better athlete, moving better, and not being so concerned with what that radar gun says. Every single pitch when we're in a pitching lesson when we're 10, 11, 12 years old. And I
Mm.
think with, obviously with the uprise in tech and everyone using technology, Rhapsody, TrackMan, radar guns, I think sometimes we can get a little carried away with, hey man, this kid's 13, he's throwing 83. Like that's cool and all, but can he pitch? Can he throw a breaking ball? How does he move? Is he really
Yeah.
stiff? And I think you're seeing as well as I am, like those kids, like they're going to get hurt a lot faster than
Yeah.
the ones that are kind of doing it a little bit more organically. Would you agree?
Oh, absolutely. That like anytime that that I'm working with younger kids, I don't get to do it a lot now that high school's starting. I'll start to work with middle school kids, and I do work with some youth kids doing some lessons, but it is strictly like athleticism. We don't get too mechanical. It's just like finding drills that's going to make them move athletically. But at the same time, like the kids do like the radar gun, and you do want to like let them have fun with it because to them it's just like fun. So just finding a way to, yeah, maybe like pull it out a little bit for them, but not use it in a way to where it's like they're starting to become obsessed with how hard they throw. I'll bust it out for a kid just to use it as like, okay, how hard are you throwing your fastball compared to your changeup? Or a lot of times it's like, hey, today we're going to have an 80% effort bullpen. I'll get the gun out and say, like, you actually need to stay below this speed. Um, just like not always like, oh, come on, come on, come on. Because I mean, it's crazy. And kids, they want to be the hardest thrower and they want to compete and it's fun. But man, it's just so unnecessary at that age. Like, you see the biggest jumps with kids sometimes like 15, 16, even going into 17. Like, every kid's a little bit different. So yeah,
Yeah.
just because you're not like one of the hardest throwers at 10, 11, 12, like, man, I've seen kids that were one of the slower kids on their team until they were like 16. And then all of a sudden at 18, they're throwing harder just because they put in the work. So,
Yeah, I mean, we can talk about one of those kids, Webster kid, Vinny Lubin, who you've worked with for a
oh,
really long time. If you want to talk about
oh,
Vinny for a minute, I mean, I think he hit 88 the other day, which, I mean, well, like I said, if you had told me Vin was going to hit 88 even last year, I would have been like, what? So
I
it's
know.
cool to see the jumps.
It is. We have a board of just like, different velocities that some of our high school kids have hit, and we always put Vinny up there as the pound for pound leader in velocity because I think he's like, I don't know how much he weighs now, but Vinny weighed like 1.5 pounds when he was born. He was born
Wow.
like several months premature, and it was always like I gave pitching lessons to Vinny when he was a little kid, and just the tiniest little kid, but always athletic. And but like, yeah, I mean, as a freshman, maybe he threw like what 70. I don't know. Like, it wasn't anything crazy, but just talk about
Yeah.
a kid who like fell in love with you know getting strong and putting in the work and seeing some results on the mound, that's the key is like you want to see the results on the mound. And that's when feel like once you have a little success in game, then kids really start to become in love with it. They're like, oh, this is what this could lead to. And he's pure testament to that. Like 88, you'd never, like you said, you would have never thought that. But man, that kid works so hard and he's strong and now he's going to college to play baseball. Like, and that's
Yes,
what
he
you want to
is.
see.
Yeah.
Not everybody's dream is to be like a D1 guy or a pro guy. Like a lot of guys is, but sometimes like kids are just wanting to make their varsity team, their JV team, and like go play in college, no matter what the level. And being able to
Yeah.
see someone like that be able to go continue his career when 2 years ago you would have thought maybe it wasn't possible is that's awesome.
No, that's what it's all about. And we mentioned three young men who are all three seniors who are all three going to different levels of college baseball, right? Zach
Yeah,
going to Mizzou, Power Four, Division One. Michael, Case Western's Division Three. Is that correct?
yeah, yep,
Yeah, Michael's touching
yeah,
90 miles an hour as a high school senior, and he's going to a Division 3 school, right? We
yeah,
sent James Umwin to Denison last year at D3 school. James was 87 to 89, and I don't
oh,
think people understand how good you have to be to play at the collegiate level, no matter the division. And it's
man,
players like Michael and James that are a huge testament to that. It's like you just assume, well, Michael's throwing 90, he's a D1 guy. It's just not how it is
yeah,
anymore.
he
Um,
would have been back in the day for sure.
oh yeah,
And
without a doubt.
that's and it's one of the hard parts about this whole thing. And I remember Parker Guthrie hit 93 as a senior. He pitches at Wash U, like topping 96 now, which is just crazy. And but like some of these kids who don't get there until senior year, and there's like a lot of D1 schools, aren't offering that late and stuff. But just because you don't start there, we've seen like as much as kids are switching around schools and stuff, like it doesn't mean you're going to end there. So like you got to stick with the process. As long as you have a place to play, you're going to be able to show off what you got, and who knows where you can end up. I mean, there's Division 3 players that have ended up in the big leagues and have had great careers. It's like you got to just
Absolutely.
find yourself on the field somewhere.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. Um, let's break it down a little bit. This is Baseball 101, where we try to keep baseball simple at times. um, talk about your youth pitching program, or even a lesson with a youth kid. You have a new kid that comes in. Obviously, what are you going to hear? You're going to hear he wants to throw harder. You're going to hear he wants to throw more strikes. He wants to maybe be a Sunday pitcher instead of a Friday arm. Where do you start? Where do you start with a 12-year-old that comes in who he's got a good arm. He has no idea where the ball's going. He moves horribly. Um, you can get too caught up too fast and work on too many things at once. How do you break it down and where do you start?
Yeah, so I would say 99.9% of them all start by saying they want to throw harder, by the
Yeah,
way. Which is yeah. So I am like a big work on the middle of their body. No matter what age, high school, college, youth, that is the thing that they struggle with the most, and to me that's the most important. So it's like getting them to be familiar with moving their pelvis without letting their entire body move. And that's unbelievably hard for a lot of kids. It's hard for kids to do it on 2 feet standing still. And then, you want to try to do it on one leg while you're moving fast. And it's difficult. So that's the main thing is I will start with like lower core strength. Most of them, like especially the younger kids, just don't have the strength yet. So doing a lot of like lower core exercises, dead bugs, stuff like that to really get them familiar with like those muscles we're trying to use. And then we just work on a lot of stuff with the pelvis. And it's amazing how much stuff will clean up if you just get the pelvis to move better. You can change an arm action by fixing the pelvis. You can change the lead leg block by fixing the pelvis. It's like so many of these things that we thought we had to work on in the past, like flying open with the glove side. It's like that might be what you feel at the end is going wrong, but what went wrong was at the beginning not loading into their back hip properly, not rotating their pelvis properly. That kind of led to all that stuff down the line. So that is like the thing I work on the most. Like I said, I think it's the most important, and it's a way of just not getting like too mechanical. We're not like, okay, you got to get to this point. Step 1, 2, 3, 4. It's like we're gonna work on rotating your pelvis. Sometimes, like I'll just give a kid like a line to step in. Maybe they're stepping so far out or across their body. Like, hey, we're gonna try to just land in this spot, and that's really as technical as I get. A lot of the arm action issues you see with younger kids, it's just a strength issue in their shoulder, around their shoulder blade. So I'll just, instead of working too much on the arm action, because I understand, like, okay, this kid's probably pushing the ball because he's just super weak right there. So we're not going to really address the arm action too much. Here's some athletic drills that I want you to start playing catch with, so you're not really thinking about your arm. Um, and then I'm just going to send them home with some exercises to start working on, to work on the strength around that shoulder blade.
Yeah, do you use water bags or PVC pipes or things of that nature to help them with the center?
Yeah, we do. We use both of those. Usually, with the older kids, we'll use the water bags a little bit more. I'm a big core velocity belt person. Um, I think that just gives kids such a good feel for it. I just used it last week with a 11-year-old, and I use it with Pete Fairbanks, who's going to be the closer for the Miami Marlins. Like, it just kind of works at all ages, giving kids a feel of the middle of their body, and there's so many different drills that you can do with it. Um, those are like the main things that we use for sure. But I'm a big belt person.
Yeah, yeah. You've mentioned some former big leaguers in the past who tend to be a little loud and boisterous on Twitter, and those guys are quick to call out any newer or different looking training methods. And
Hmm.
for me, if I can change the implement that's in a kid's hand, or I can change what they're thinking when they're throwing, for me, I find it's easier for them to make a change instead of thinking about throwing a baseball. And I think that's where the PVC pipes, the water bags, the plyo balls, even I don't even know what they're called, the sticks that the sticks they throw, just
Yeah,
anything to kind of help influence how you want them to move without like forcing them to move it that way with a ball in their hand.
yeah,
I find is why we like to use those. Would you agree, or do you see it differently?
yeah. No, absolutely agree. I mean, because baseball, like, it's something familiar to them, so it's harder to break the habit because they've done it so many times. But you get a kid on the mound with a med ball, or put the belt on, or PVC pipe, like you said, like, you can get them to move how you want them to move because it's something different. They're not going to go back, in their mind. It's something different. It's not something they've ever done before. But you put them in these drills and these positions to be in, and it's like, take video, show it to them, like, dude, this is it. Like, now really try to get in touch with your body, feel what that feels like, and that's exactly what we're going for on the mound. But sometimes when you just are always putting a baseball in their hand, it's like it's so hard to not go back to old habits that it's just going to be so hard to break sometimes. So it takes so many reps to fix a problem sometimes. But yeah, if you can put those different implements in their mind or in their body, in their hand, like, you take a video, you show it to them, is like, that looks perfect. You've never looked that good on the mound before. And it's a good way of definitely blending into the delivery. So we do a lot of stuff on the plyo wall, and we have a plyo wall set up that's off the slope, so they're trying to go off the mound as much as possible, just because the different timing that it's going to create from flat ground. We don't do a ton of flat ground stuff, but yeah, it's helped a lot for sure.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of throwing plyos off the mound into the wall instead of on flat ground for sure. I've tried to steer clear of a lot of flat ground stuff just for the discrepancy in timing of how everything's
Mhm.
working versus being on the slope. But I mean, we're asking kids to get into their backside and to ride the slope. Well, if there's no slope to ride, that's a hard thing to keep focusing on, right? And obviously,
Yeah,
the actual act of pitching is done on the mound, so we want to make sure that a lot of the work that they're doing is on the mound instead of on flat ground. So I'm with you there for sure.
Yeah.
Um,
And one other thing I wanted to touch on that has to do with that is like a lot of times I've seen we've even gotten to like on the mound with a plow ball and a kid's delivery will look great. And then you get him like, 1 minute later with a baseball on the mound thrown to 60 feet and it'll look completely different. And then you're like, man, what is going on? Like you were just throwing right here. So a lot of times when that happens, we'll like bring a net over with a baseball, put it, 15, 20 feet in front of them. Because sometimes it's just like a mental thing where they see a different target farther away and stuff will change. So we'll do it like that, where then we'll just start with the net close. All right, that's it. Then we'll just move it back and back. So it's just being creative with different things like that and figuring out, what's going on in their mind that might be blocking them. And you really just got to talk to the kid and, you know, jot down different things that work for them, and each kid's so different. And I think that's what's great about what we do now is like we're able to find those different things with different kids and teach them in a way that's going to benefit, that kid specifically.
Yeah, absolutely. I think when the focus is, how are we moving on the slope? How does it feel? How are the quote unquote mechanics feeling? When they're also thinking about hitting a target, then their mind's two different places. Right. So I
Yeah.
love having the net 10, 15 feet away where there's no target. It's like, hey dude, just feel how you're moving. Don't be focused on where the baseball's going. Don't be worried about control. Just feel it right. And then when you do have a catcher or a target back there, now the focus needs to not be on how you're moving, how you're feeling. It needs to be on where's that baseball ending up? Am I throwing it where I want it to go? Am I controlling the baseball? And I think sometimes it's hard for kids, especially some kids who are a lot more just have a harder time focusing because we run into
Yeah.
all different types of kids on working on throwing the ball where they want it to go and moving the way they want to move. That's a hard thing to do. So I think if you can
Yeah.
separate the two and you can put the focus and the emphasis on here's what we're doing today, cool, we did that. Here's what we're doing now. It can kind of help with those, you know, quote unquote control issues or those movement pattern issues.
Absolutely. Yeah, once we got into like our bullpen phase on the mound, we've been working for months with kids on their delivery and how they move. And when it's bullpen day, a kid, I'll be standing by them. They'll throw a couple bad ones in a row, and they'll like look to me like, "Whoa, what am I doing wrong? What am I doing wrong?" And like, I really don't give them any mechanic. I'm like, dude, I'm not. We're not talking about that right now. Like, maybe change your eye level, change where you're aiming. Like, but I'm not gonna give you. You're not gonna have a different mechanical cue after every pitch. Like, that's just not the way to do it. We'll save the mechanical stuff for the next day that you're in when it's not your bullpen day. And then you can work on that during the week. And then you got to get to a point where, like, at the end of the day, you got to just be able to make pitches out there on the mound. Like, you're not going to have somebody there coaching you up after every pitch. And if you do, it's probably not going to help you very much because you're thinking about the wrong thing.
But it shows how we've evolved as pitching instructors because that's literally how you and I were taught to pitch. Like we were taught that if we missed the spot, it's probably because our mechanics were off, or our arm wasn't up on
Absolutely.
time, or we didn't block out the weak leg, or we flew open. And it's just cool to see how much smarter as a community we've become, and how much it's really helped these kids to
Yeah.
instead of think, man, I just threw four balls in a row in the same spot. Maybe it's not because my mechanics are jacked. Maybe it's because I'm
Right.
I'm looking too high. I'm not aiming low enough. And you've
Right.
got mom and dad and the coach in the stands yelling, just throw strikes. It's like, buddy, he's trying
Yeah.
to throw strikes. He's literally
Yeah.
every ball he throws, he's trying to throw a strike. Maybe he should try to
Yeah.
throw a ball. And it's like, what? Like when you
Yeah.
look the kid in the eye and you say, I do not want you to throw a strike. I want you to throw the ball in the dirt. And they look at you like you have seven heads. And then they throw the pitch and it's, right down central. It's just kind of an eye
Yeah.
opening experience for them. Like, oh, maybe it wasn't anything I was physically doing. It was just my
Right.
thought process or where my eyes were.
Yeah.
It has helped. I believe it has helped pitchers be more successful in those in-game scenarios because they haven't been hyper focused on how everything feels or how they're moving. And I've run into kids in the past, and I'm sure you have too, who they're hyper aware of how they feel every time they throw a baseball. and they have such a hard time competing because they're so hung up on how it feels. And they could be immensely talented throwers, pitchers, but their careers
Yeah.
kind of just come to a screeching halt, and usually
Yeah.
end with an injury because they can't separate the two.
Yeah, for sure. And yeah, sometimes kids that you maybe look the best in a bullpen aren't going to be your best in game pitchers. It is. It's just like the end of the day, it comes down to being able to compete on the mound and make pitches and make adjustments. Just like you said, changing your eye level, changing the feel of your release point, not becoming hyper obsessed with like, oh, I pulled off on that one. It's like, okay, your mechanics aren't changing that much pitch to pitch, and that given, you just struck the last kid out. You're not all of a sudden like pulling off. It's like, let's think of another change to make. You know, so yeah, it's hard because at the end of the day, like we are using a lot of data and a lot of different things that the kids become obsessed with. So we try to really make a conscious like shift in our training depending on the type of year to kind of get away from that stuff a little bit and focus more on making pitches. And yeah, it's tough. We're always learning though.
We are, and that's something I've always respected and liked about you is you've just you're constantly trying to learn more. You're constantly trying to better yourself. It's why I consider you one of the best pitching minds I know, just from our conversations and just from what I've seen you do with with the kids you work with and the kids that had the pleasure of working with and you've gotten to work with. It truly is important if we want to be successful as coaches slash trainers. We have to constantly be striving for more. We can't expect our
Yeah.
kids to keep working on getting better if we're not going to work on getting better as well. And
Yeah.
that's that. I think there's a lot of instructors in our area that have that mindset. And I think for the most part, St. Louis is blossoming and growing into a really good area for youth and high school baseball. I mean, we're seeing more and more kids, get drafted out of our area, more and more kids going and playing at the collegiate level. And it's really cool seeing the kids that go off that were pretty good in high school, but not great. But, like the Henrys and Orrs of the world who are just destroying the baseball at USC Upstate now, who is a good player at SLU High, but is now, one of the nation's leading hitters at the D1 level. It's cool to see these kids as they kind of grow into their adult bodies really start to show what they can do. And it just goes along with everything I'm trying to get everyone to understand. It doesn't matter how good you are at 12 and 13. It is all about the process and all about striving to make yourself the best player you can be when it actually matters, which is years down the road. And
Yeah.
just all these, youth rankings and, this World Series here and that World Series here. And, my 9U team's ranked here. None of it matters. None of it matters at all. And you have kids like Zach Van Hook and Cole Koontz for that matter, and Michael Strong and Vinny Lubin. Like they're perfect examples of that. Like they're
Yeah.
absolute studs, and at the level they're at right now. And they fell in love with the process and they worked their butts off to get there.
Yeah, exactly. St. Louis is very lucky, I feel like, as far as, I mean, there are multiple different programs of people doing this type of stuff we do, and everybody's cool with each other. Like, we all have a respect for each other. I think we've all, like, at some point reached out to bounce ideas off of each other. And I have a hard time believing that that's like that everywhere, you know? We have a great team of, like, physical therapists with Nolan. Like, he's just so smart to be able to like use him. You have like the health side of it, other pitching minds, and everybody, nobody's trashing each other. We all know that we're teaching like the same things. There's probably a couple things differently, but for the most part, like, we're all on the same page and have a respect for each other. And I think it's really helped with the development in St. Louis. Like, you could pick a handful of different places to go to, and as long as you fall in love with that process, like, you're probably going to get better, a lot better. There are kids still that, like, maybe they go 1 year and we've seen it, and they didn't like gain 5 miles an hour right away, and then they switch to another place, and then they're team hoppers, program hoppers, and all of a sudden they're on their third or fourth one, and you're like, okay, maybe you were the problem, but I don't know. It's just part of it, and but yeah, I think there's so many different places that you can go to in St. Louis that, man, if you just stick with it and like fall in love with the training, you're gonna get better.
Yeah. Yeah, it comes to consistent attendance, and it comes to wanting to be there. It comes down to wanting to put the work in, sacrificing some fun things as a high school kid, you know, to get that work done and to get to the level you want to be. And anytime you and I are talking about, a higher profile guy that one of us is working with, they usually live at our facility. They're usually there a lot. They're usually putting in the work. They're usually getting in the weight room. They're usually, showing up 4 or 5 times a week. They're doing what's being asked of them. And
Zach and
it's not
Michael are there. Zach and Michael are there legit 4 to 6 days a week for multiple hours each time. I think like the whole senior class at Vianney just went to their senior trip in Mexico, and maybe two kids didn't go. One of them was Zach, because he was going to throw out a pro day. But it's just like, yeah, and that's the hardest part about living where we live is like the consistency of throwing. And it is hard with cold weather, but that's the biggest thing is like, man, we're only getting a lot of the kids in there twice a week. So you have to find other days of the week to be able to throw, even if you're throwing into a net in the garage or throwing a ball up against a wall. Like, you got to find a way. And the best ones usually do find a way. But,
they
like
do.
throwing 1 or 2 days a week and lifting 1 or 2 days a week, it's just not enough. I wish every kid could come in every single day. And it's harder for the younger kids that can't drive, and I get it, but man, if you want to find a way, like you will. I've had videos sent to me before from Ian Losey, who's Ian. He's senior at Mizzou now. Like, he's sent me videos of himself throwing a plyo ball into a couch in a hotel room, being like, "How's this look?" So it's like you could find a way.
Absolutely. I'm going to put spot here and ask you a couple questions. One, do you believe that there should be a shutdown period from throwing for high school, youth, high school, college age pitchers?
Maybe a little bit. We don't do a long time though, and it's dependent on the kid. If the kid has thrown a ton of innings, say in the spring and the summer, like they'll maybe take a couple weeks of August off. But I'm a big fan of throwing as much as possible. We do a good job, I think, of like making sure it's low effort. That's honestly like when I will use the radar gun the most. It's like, okay, you're gonna keep throwing, but you're gonna stay at like 60% effort. So I'm gonna have you go start to play catch. I'm gonna come watch you, because sometimes you tell kids 60% effort, you take your eye off them and they start chucking it. They're kids, so as long
Right.
as you're able to keep an eye on them and really trust that the kid's gonna do the right thing, like keeping your arm moving, throwing 50%, 60% effort, like couple days of the week, it's not gonna hurt you. Like, I see way more kids, and you may have a different experience, but I see way more kids that are getting hurt from underuse than overuse.
I
It's the
agree.
kids who's aren't, they're throwing 1 or 2 days a week, and then every time they throw, they're trying to chuck it. So, I'll get the radar gun out and be like, hey, all right, show me your 60% effort. And then once they find that, then I'll radar it and I'll be like, all right, don't go over this the rest of the time. And so then they can, kind of monitor, okay, this is my 60% effort below. This is what I need to be at. And I think if you can do it like in a responsible way like that, I'm all for throwing pretty much year round. And then, you know, sometimes we'll ramp up and then we'll dial it back down and then we'll ramp up. But like just having a plan to go by, and as long as you stick to that plan, I think that's the best way to go. I'm not a fan of the 3-4 month shutdown. I see so many more kids come back and get hurt from stuff like that. I hate that, and it's so hard to gain any like that. start throwing again, you're throwing 8 miles an hour slower than you were last summer. You're like, what is going on? Like, it's like, sorry, bud. Like, try not lifting for 4 months and see how much weaker
Right.
you get. Like, it's how it works.
I agree. And typically, those kids that take that long shutdown period, they ramp up way too fast, way too short of a window, and that's when we
Yeah,
see
because
kids
you
get
have
hurt.
to.
Yeah, you have no choice, right? If you shut
Yeah,
down October, November, December, oh, you don't have time to be ready to throw pitch one March 15th. You do not have the time.
yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah,
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more with you. I'm a huge fan of year-round throwing as long as it's responsible. I love what you said about using the radar gun to judge RPE. No kid on planet Earth knows what their 80% RPE is. Like it's impossible to know.
right.
So if you have a gun to kind of show them, hey, when you feel like you're throwing at 60%, this is the velocity is, this is where we need to stay. That really does give them a benchmark of where they need to be. And I think
Yeah,
you're seeing that more and more now at the collegiate and pro level with guys throwing their 80% pens. And, kids will post on Twitter, sub max. I hate that term, sub max pen
yeah,
at 97. Like, yeah, okay, buddy,
yeah,
whatever. Like
yeah,
85% bullpen today, sitting 89, 91. Like, come on, man.
yeah,
So if you can,
yeah,
you can really give them a feel for what it is. I think that's a great way to go about it. I really like that.
yeah.
Next question. What is easier to improve, velocity or control?
Um, I would say velocity, in my opinion. But it's dependent on the kid. It's a hard one to answer because sometimes it's velocity with the kid, and sometimes it's a simple mechanical cue or a thought, and it could be control. But control usually like doesn't last. Where it's gaining velocity for a kid is something that's actually lasting. So my answer would be velocity, but I kind of answered both, so I don't know if that's a good answer or not.
I have to agree with you. I think it's very hard to take someone who's a 50% strike thrower and turning them into a 65% strike thrower throughout their career. I think that's very hard to do. But we see kids all the time who go from 82 to 95 in 3 or 4 years, right? Um,
Yeah,
I just I I think it's a lot tougher to, and that's the art of pitching is being able to throw, control, and command the baseball, and that's a skill,
yeah,
and that's a skill that I think some have that others just don't quite possess. Can it be
yeah,
improved? Minimally, yeah. I think it could be improved. I don't think it could be vastly improved, but I believe velocity can
yeah,
be vastly improved.
yeah.
I mean,
And a lot of times, like, and improving a kid's control is it. I'll really harp on like just making your misses smaller. Like if
yeah,
you can take a kid from every miss they have is a wild pitch to okay, now they're missing maybe a foot out of the zone. Well, now you're going to start getting swings and misses out of the zone. So it's like
right.
I think it was Snell or somebody recently, in the last few years that won the Cy Young. I think it was Snell. And I heard something like maybe like 30 something percent of his pitches that season were in the strike zone. Um, but like you get good stuff, you stay around the zone, then you start getting guys to swing and miss at pitches out of the zone. And it's like, you don't have to just sit there and paint like on the corner. It's like this people just it's really hard to do. Major league pitchers
Yeah,
don't do that.
right.
And I think that's like a misconception at the youth level where like a lot of coaches get obsessed with like, okay, outside corner and the catcher's setting up just right on the black for a 10-year-old. It's like, man, you're just asking a little too much from that kid. Like,
Yeah.
let's try to aim for like the fat part of the plate and get the kid used to throwing strikes instead of nitpicking. And if you can make their misses smaller, like they're gonna have more success.
Yeah, I mean, you have legitimate professional organizations that are down the middle orgs for their pitchers. Like they literally tell them
Yeah,
throw your best stuff down the middle because it's not going to end up down the
yeah,
middle. But if you're aiming middle,
right.
your margin for error is greater. Um,
Yeah,
you're watching a kid throw a breaking ball, and for whatever reason, he just can't spin one. And I come across it every so often, and it drives me a little bit crazy because like I could spin a breaking ball if I wasn't able to, and I tried different approach after different approach. What do you do when you encounter a kid who just can't quite figure out how to spin a breaking ball? Or have you encountered that?
I have, and it is very, very hard. One of the hardest things that you do, because it's like you can try a million different grips that different cues, and it's just like the kid just can't do it. So I try to get them. I've actually started using like this little baby like 1 pound weight that we have. That's like this big, and just like have them start throwing it and see that get it to rotate this way. Kind of take a video, show them what their hand looks like. Okay, now we're gonna take the ball and we're gonna do it the same way. Sometimes it helps a little bit. Cam Lloyd has been doing, what I think you probably did as a kid. I know did as a kid, was just the old laying down and trying to work on spinning the ball up to yourself and throwing it in the air. Like I remember doing that all the time as a kid. I just feel like kids, we felt like, oh, yeah, we were always able to throw a breaking ball, but like I was always doing stuff like that too. Like always just walking around with the
Yeah.
baseball and trying to feel it out. And I feel like maybe just kids, um, they don't like practice it enough. They've never really felt what it felt like, but you can get there. It's just like, are you taking a baseball at home and actually watching yourself from 5, 10 feet away, like spin the ball in the direction you want to spin it to? I don't know if they are. So we try to do a lot of that. I'm a big fan of like playing catch at like 15 to 20 feet and just trying to spin it from there. And I feel like kids are able to kind of pick it up a little bit better that way when they can actually see what the rotation looks like, because then they understand like, oh, okay, that's what I'm doing. But sometimes you're throwing at 60 feet, they can't really see it, so maybe they don't understand exactly what is they're trying to accomplish. So yeah, I'd say short catch would be my best way.
Yeah, I like that. Maybe even isolating the lower half and just kind of be focused on the upper body and the arm swing and how it feels out of the hand, kind of like a stuck in the mud type drill.
Yeah.
Um, Two more hard hitting questions. This one to go along with the breaking ball. How young is too young to throw a breaking ball?
I don't I Yeah, I'm like I let kids, if a kid comes in and they're 10, 11, 12 and they're like, "Hey, can I show you my curveball?" I'm not going to be like, "No," like yeah, show it to me. And a lot of kids that age like can throw a pretty good one. So I let them do it. Like I think it's been proven, that like as long as you're not doing anything crazy with your arm and changing up the way that you normally throw, like it's not any worse for you than a fastball. So I've let kids maybe as young as 11, 12 years old throw it and have no problem with it. I just try to tell them like make sure like don't fall in love with the success at this pitch and become obsessed with it, because you will be able to throw a below average breaking ball at 12 years old and get away with
Right.
it and strike people out, and it can be fun. But at the same time, like you want to be throwing some heaters, because the more that you're practicing throwing the fastball and throwing it firm, like you're just going to be developing your fastball to start throwing harder, as you grow up. So I don't like that if they become obsessed with it, but I definitely let them throw it at a young age for sure.
Yeah, I'm the same. I think it's a good pitch to actually work on in bullpens when they're younger, just to get a feel for it and get comfortable with it. And you find that the kids who usually have really good breaking balls and they're older, they did throw it earlier. They developed the feel for it earlier, but not even breaking it out in games until they're 12 years old. Because it is a crutch that they can lean on, and you're making sure they're developing the fastball and the changeup. I've got a 10-year-old that I work with who has a brilliant breaking ball, but he's not allowed to throw it in games yet. We work on it in practice, we work on it in our lesson, but we're fastball changeup in games because I don't want him to rely on that pitch to beat hitters when I want him to beat hitters other ways. So I agree with you
Yeah,
100% there. Um,
yeah.
Final question. You'll see this sign up at times, and I'm just curious your thoughts on it. no one cares how hard you throw a ball for.
Yeah, I get the thought behind that, but it's just not true. And that's just a reality. Um, I know we agree on this, but that's we you have to worry about velocity. That's how baseball is these days. We talked about earlier. At the end of the day, it's about competing, but when it comes to playing at the next level and getting on a team, like that's what college coaches look for. So we've you know tinkered our training around like doing what's going to make the kid play at the next level. And a lot of times, like a kid that's throwing 92 that's wild is going to get recruited more than a kid that's throwing 82 that, hits a spot every time. That's just how it is. So, um, yeah, that stuff's ridiculous. It's just a lot of old school people who just hate the way that baseball is now, and I get it. And some stuff they say there is some validity to. Like I'm not a big fan of kids just trying to chuck it and throw as hard as they can and not have a clue where it's going. But most of the time that's not the case, Like very rarely
Yeah,
do you see that. A lot of times it's a kid that's like actually a good pitcher who probably does have good control, but like they wanted to show off to social media how hard they threw one, and it's like, okay,
right.
it's not that we're just like telling these kids, hey, let's chuck it, not worry about where it goes all the time. Like, it's just not reality. And yeah, but that's just how baseball is. And so if coaches are going to recruit that way, then you have to be able to show that you can throw hard. Um, so
Yeah.
I think that's just a lot of bitter people that never threw hard, and they just hate seeing it, you know?
Yeah, and until PBR and PG start posting bullpen strike percentages leaderboards, I'm going to keep
Yeah.
telling my guys to try to throw it hard at their showcases.
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, that's what's gonna get you seen. Like I've posted videos in the past of kids throwing a great bullpen, but maybe they're throwing 80 miles an hour, and I don't get any messages from coaches. And then you post a kid who's, maybe not spotting up as well, but like showing elite stuff, and all of a sudden your DMs start blowing up. It's just like,
Hmm.
yeah, it's the way baseball is now, so you gotta adapt, and it sucks if the people on Twitter don't like it.
Which is kind of funny because you and I both agreed that it's harder to improve control than it is velocity. But all
Yeah.
these schools and these pro orgs, they want the velocity. They think they can teach the control. That's kind of what I'm getting from it.
Yeah, and I don't necessarily agree with how recruiting goes, Like I think if I
Yeah.
was a college coach, like I would be out there looking for the kids that just move athletically. You could tell maybe weren't physically developed, but like they could spin a breaking ball for a strike in any count, throw a change up. Like that's the kid for me that I could see in a couple years being like, okay, that's legit. But with the way the transfer portal and stuff is now, it's like coaches they don't have time to develop you for 3 years. It's like they want the guy that's going to come in immediately and give an impact. And so with that changing, it does make it hard. Like you got to be able to show them that you can go in now. It's like, okay, you're not going to just sit around on our bench for, 2, 3 years getting stronger. So yeah, it sucks, but I don't know what to I don't know if it's gonna change anytime soon.
No, I mean 78 to 80 is never going to get your foot in the door, no matter how good of a pitcher
Yeah,
you are nowadays, and that's just kind of the reality of it.
yeah,
Man, I really appreciate you coming on today. I appreciate your
yeah,
insight. It's been great catching up. Love
yeah.
love the conversations we've had in the past and bouncing things off each other. And like I said, just one of the better pitching minds I know, and definitely one of the better ones in our area. Do you have any social media handles that you can throw out so people can follow you?
Yeah. Those so our Mach 1 pitching on Twitter. That would be the main one that we use. I'll have to look up the account. Let me look it up really quick. It's right here.
No problem.
So my personal is at A Marks 27 on Twitter. Mostly just post baseball stuff, videos of different guys throwing, and then our Mach 1 at Mach 1 baseball. on Twitter. That's where we post the most. But mad props to you, Dave. Like I said earlier, you were one of the first getting into all this stuff, and I've definitely learned a lot from you over the years, and we've developed a good friendship, and love talking to you anytime, man. So it was my pleasure.
Thanks so much, man. I couldn't appreciate you more. All right, everybody, that's it for today's show. We'll have another good one next week. But for Youth Baseball Midwest and Baseball 101, we're signing off. We'll see you next time.